For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the world watched this summer as George Floyd pleaded for his life as a police officer kneeled on his neck. Now, in the stillness of the pandemic-induced isolation, his death and the deaths of other Black Americans like Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor brought something that had been simmering in America for centuries to a boiling point.
News 5's Frank Wiley spoke with 3 recent graduates about the changes they're seeing and still hope to see as a result of this social justice shift.
"2020 took so much away.
I would have loved to have been able to walk across the stage and celebrate with my family.
Prom too, I still got my suit just sitting in there. Really nice suit.
I tried out for the cheerleading team this year, made it, but we didn't have a season.
And for these graduates who saw their futures reimagined on top of the racial turmoil playing out in the headlines.
I just feel like we live in a society where we still aren't accepted.
It was a breaking point.
It's just, it's tough. It's tough.
I was very devastated.
But the streets weren't just filled with Black Americans who had enough.
That's good, but that can only get you so far.
There were white allies.
We're learning from each other.
Some just waking up to the reality that racism is alive and well in 2020.
It just hurts me. It really hurts me. And to be a Black woman personally, like some days I go out and I'm just nervous to go out because I don't know what could happen. Like I could be the next Breonna Taylor.
An Associated Press NORC poll found 39% of white adults said police violence is a very serious problem. That's up from 19% back in 2015. And the sale of anti-racism books like White Fragility soared. The head of the Cleveland NAACP says for white America, the work is just beginning.
I think white America has to understand that there are many people in this country, especially white people, that ultimately don't even understand the gravity of what racism does to families, to households, to communities.
And part of that work is building trust with Black communities who saw higher rates of COVID-19 infections and deaths than their white counterparts this year.
African Americans have more of the circumstances that make it harder to survive this pandemic. Deep-rooted poverty, pre-existing medical conditions, lack of access to health care, less stable employment.
And are less likely to trust the vaccine.
It's hard to explain. My parents wouldn't take a vaccine, so I wouldn't take one.
One doctor says there's reason for communities of color to believe in the process.
For those 2 companies that I mentioned, Pfizer and Moderna, the inclusion of people of color is upwards of above 30%, I believe, in each of those.
More specifically, Black representation in the trials of the Pfizer vaccine was around 10%. And after the 40-year trauma of the Tuskegee experiment, she stressed.
When the vaccine becomes approved under emergency use authorization or traditional approval, it is no longer experimental.
After a year spent battling racism, disease, and distrust, November brought change.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
Historic voter turnout this fall brought our country its first Black woman and South Asian American vice president. And our future nurses, audio engineers, and business owners found reason to hope.
2020 has taught me to keep up or push through the dark times.
I'm always hopeful. I don't ever lose hope.
I don't think you have a choice but to be hopeful.
Since despite all the bad, 2020 did bring momentum to the movement for a country where all men and women are truly created equal.
The thing about America that has made me smile is the resiliency of people coming together.
Frank Wiley.
We cannot take our foot off the gas.
News 5.